So, let's start with a definition. So, what is a poem? What is poetry? And it's a very difficult question to answer. You know, every generation sort of kind of comes up with their own qualifications of what a poem isn't, it seems, more often than what a poem is. But the word poem or poetry comes from the ancient Greek that I can't pronounce, but I can pronounce the Italian, poeio, which means I create. So fundamentally, a poem is a made thing. It's a designed thing. So then what is it made to do? What is it designed to do? Could you... Thanks. Manual. Okay. So William Wordsworth, and you don't have to be a fan of William Wordsworth, but he had a very useful, if not a bit abstract, definition of poetry. And Wordsworth says that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, a very Wordsworthian line, right? But he's not wrong, right? So it's a design thing, a made thing. And what is it designed to do? To evoke powerful feelings. Fair enough? Okay. All right, next. Okay. But all poems, regardless of form, style, school, etc., have essentially four main qualities, right? A poem has to be economical, right, in its use of language, because what differentiates a poem from a short story or a novel often is the length and the use of language, because the language that it uses is very figurative, right? It uses metaphor, it uses simile, it uses conceits, right? It plays little word games in the line with alliteration, assonance, consonants, right? Things that, you know, work really well in short spaces, but you might get annoyed by a novelist who loved alliteration. Would you agree? After 300 pages, maybe a lot of alliteration might kind of start to wear thin on you. But, you know, 14 lines, alliteration is awesome. The poem is emotionally evocative, as we said before. It has to stir some intense feeling within you. And it's perfectly fine if you read a poem and it doesn't move you. You know, that's perfectly fine. You'll move on to the poem that does. But poems are also visually strong. The poet has to rely on the image that his language can create in your mind. Okay, so these are the four qualities that I tend to use. I'm sure another poet might give you some different qualities. But these, in my opinion, are the four most important qualities for good poetry. Economical, in other words, there's no word left that is unnecessary. Bye-bye Dickens, right? There's no word in the poem that is unnecessary. Every word in there has to be playing some part for the larger role. It uses figurative language, but at the same time, the language can't be too abstract. Okay? When poets are just starting out to write, they tend to, you know, hold on to abstract things like love, like freedom, etc. But the problem with those types of words is that they don't create the same image, or they don't create clear images in the minds of the audience or the minds of the reader. So good poets tend to rely on solid things, on things that the reader can picture, that they can realize, to then get to the abstract, like freedom, etc. Right? So, which is all well and good, right? You know, a bunch of people, you know, wearing dark clothes, sitting in a cafe in Paris smoking cigarettes and playing word games, right? And like 5 people read their book, right? So what is the point of poetry? You know, why is poetry, or why should we think poetry is important? Why should poetry matter to us? Next slide. Because poetry helps us deal with life and the world. Poetry is a way of understanding, of empathizing, of figuring out your place in the world. And to realize that the most important thing, the most important lesson poetry teaches us is that we are not alone in it. Okay? I'll give you an example. When you are experiencing a trying moment in your life, when you are at your lowest moment, your lowest ebb, or at your highest peak, what kind of language can you turn to encapsulate those emotions? As much as I love novels, you're not going to sit down and quote, Moby Dick. Right? I know one line from Moby Dick. They call me Ishmael, first line. So it's poetry that we turn to. And I'll pause here. How many of you like or actively read poetry? Not many people. Okay, cool. Give me a second. Okay. Let me ask you another question. Because I think you're lying to yourself. Allow me to prove it. How many of you like music? Okay. Take a walk with me. Think about your favorite song. I'll give you a second. All right. Take away the drums. Take away the instruments. What are you left with? Lyrics, right? Words. Are those words economical? Could that singer carry that message in a much longer form? In other words, could the message of the song, could it be a short story? Yes, no? Could it be a novel? Could it be a film? It could be in any other form of art, right? Agreed? But what you're left with is rather economical language, right? Is it visually strong? Does it create images in your mind that you think about when you listen to it? Okay. Is it emotionally evocative? It is. Because what you're listening to is poetry. So let me go back to my first question. How many of you like and actively enjoy poetry? Thank you. Next slide. Now, so one of the things that poetry is especially powerful in helping us deal with is loss, is grief, death. I'm going to read to you, you're going to read with me. I'll read, you listen, how about that? So I'll read these two poems to you, and you would listen, hopefully, attentively. And they both deal with death slightly differently. Okay? You know what, scratch that. I'll read one poem. It's late. So this poem is called Stop All the Clocks, and it's by the English writer W.H. Auden. Anybody know who Auden is? See, I got that. Al gave me that. Yeah, so good. This is my favorite Auden poem, hands down. Okay, and hopefully at the end of it, you'll see why. Okay, because that's all those things, all those qualities I said good poetry has. Stop all the clocks. Stop all the clocks. Cut off the telephone. Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin. Let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle, moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good. That's one of those poems that just kind of gives you that gut punch. You know, and he captures what grief really does to the soul, what loss really does to a person. Sorry to bring the mood down. But it's economical. Every word in there does something. It's visually strong. Before he touched the abstract ideas like love, right? Like goodness, he's filled with tangible, visible things that we can relate to. before we get to the abstract. And that's what good poetry does, right? It uses image in this way. But then listen also to the rhyme, the rhythm, the meter. Auden is one of those masters that seems as if he could write almost any form, right? Shakespeare is famous for the sonnets, but someone like Auden could write sonnets, villanelles, whatever, right? And all good poetry, whether it is a form poetry or free verse, has to understand the use of meter, right? And that's what makes it so similar to music. That's why you can set poetry to music, because of its meter, because of its rhythm. And going back to visually strong poetry, William Carlos Williams is what we call an imagist poet. He's an American poet at the turn of the last century. And the Imagism school took the idea of being visually strong to the extreme. It took the idea of being economical to the extreme, right? So you can strip away everything that's unnecessary until you find that one image that conveys the meaning that you want it to. All right, so this is my favorite William Carlos Williams poem. I have lots of favorite poems, so sorry. It was really hard to get the number of poems down for this thing. Anyhow, The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. That's it. That's it, done. You can, this could be a painting, right? Right? And one of the things I'm very passionate about is how we introduce people to poetry. I think one of the reasons why not many people didn't raise their hands when I asked the question at first is because one of the most dangerous things, in terms of injuring our ability to appreciate poetry is how we're taught it. I think in preschool we're doing a great job. Ring Around the Rosie, Hickory Dickory Dock, we're learning meter, we're learning rhyme, we're learning imagery. We're doing a great job. But somewhere between preschool and kindergarten and, the upper grades in primary school, something starts to happen. So by the time the kids, graduate from high school and to come to my classroom in the college, there's what we call a poetry anxiety. They see a poem on the page and the walls go up, the lights go out, and people are like, don't know what this is, it's craziness. Right. So we need to work actively against that. I think one of the biggest problems in education with poetry in particular is that we teach poetry with comprehension. In other words, we take meaning and we elevate meaning to the top of the list when it comes to appreciating poetry. But poetry, like I said before, is a made thing. It's a designed thing. Right? It's made to evoke intense emotions, right? Remember that stuff from the first slide? It took a while, but we got it up, so remember it? That's what art does, right? Evokes strong emotions, right? That's why you guys have favorite songs, because those songs evoke strong emotions. That's why you have favorite artists. That's why you like to, experience art. You don't take a kid to an art gallery and say, this is the Mona Lisa, for example. You have a test in 5 minutes. What does it mean? You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't sterilize art in such a way, but that's something that we do to poetry every single day in the classroom. So, pardon the tangent, The Red Wheelbarrow. 4 stanzas, despite it being so short, is very, very attuned to a meter. Right? I won't bore you with the poetry terminologies, but essentially, it's symmetrical. The first stanza and the last stanza have the same meter, and just to give you a cheat guide without getting into metrics and poetry meter, just count syllables, right? So the first and the last stanzas both have 7 syllables, and the middle stanzas have 6. Right? So what this does, it automatically creates the rhythm for you. Right? That's how you measure meter in poetry. Right? The syllables are combined in different ways that are very technical, but I won't get into that. So it's a very economically well-designed machine, this poem is. And 3 of the 4 stanzas deal with the image. This red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. What can we extract from that image? What meaning can we extract from that image? Where are we? someplace rural, a farm, right? It's just rained. We know for sure the farmer rears chickens. It's automatic. Any image, any photograph, any painting can give us that information from those three stanzas. So all of the poetic movement, all of the emotional evocation comes in the first stanza, right? So much depends upon. What is it that depends upon the red wheelbarrow? The farmer's life, the farmer's livelihood, right? The way of life of this community, the culture, right? What would happen if there were no wheelbarrow? Right? That's what Williams has us thinking about. And that's what poetry can do in such a small space. You can imagine a short story or a film, about a rural area and how they try to, make a way through life for themselves. But Williams can do this in this poem. Next slide. And now, probably, as of 5 o'clock on June 10th, my favorite poem, Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. And it's a sonnet. And the meter is ridiculous. Shelley is one of the English masters of sonnets. But poetry has a way of transporting us. Right? So we've been to Auden, right? At Auden's, his funeral. Not his funeral, but him visiting a funeral. We've been in rural United States with Williams. And now Shelley, is going to take us to ancient Egypt, having never been there himself. We do know that he was a rabid Egyptologist. He loved learning about ancient Egypt. And he wrote this poem, and most of the poem is in his friend's voice. Okay? But listen carefully. If you hear the rhythm, look out for the imagery, right? The tangible images that you can place. And then finally listen for the emotion that he's going to reach out and touch you with. Fair enough? Okay. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and snare of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Now, history buffs might know that Ozymandias is the Greek name for Ramses II, right? And those of you who know your Old Testament, Ramses is the guy who we know through the Moses story, right? So no little ego here, right? But look at Shelley's poem, right? And the irony of the imagery of Ozymandias' or Ramses' statue and the inscription and what really is there, right? That the great works of man, right? The height of Egyptian civilization, right? The height of Egyptian empire, and now nothing there is left. In a way, reminding us that death is that great leveler, that time, is something that is undefeated and undefeatable. Right? And it's a way that Shelley is able to sort of bring us down from our arrogant pedestals and remember that there's something much more powerful out there. Okay? Right? I'll leave you today with, an Instagram poem, right? From a thousands of years long dead Persian poet, Rumi. Great poet too, right? Although I would love to be able to read him in the original Arabic. But Rumi says, Stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. So, a competing message from what we get from Shelley. That there's greatness inside of us. We are made of star stuff, as Neil deGrasse Tyson would say. That we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. I think this is what really moves poetry for me. This is what makes poetry so powerful for me. And I hope that my little talk today has opened your eyes to maybe go and explore some poetry yourselves. Thank you very much. Good day.